Rita, ADOT, Pima County, and Oro Valley. So thanks so much, everyone, for taking the time to join this afternoon. And we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. So this is the PAG Regional Active Transportation Plan, or the RATP Technical Working Group meeting for Tuesday, June 17th. All right, so we will just get started with some introductions. And before we do that, I'll just make a quick note. So if you do need to leave or can't stay the entirety of the meeting, I don't believe we'll go the full 2 hours. If you could just go ahead and let me know, so just so we can make sure that we can maintain quorum. So I'll go ahead and get started with introductions. I'll just kind of go down the list as the names appear on my screen here. But my name is Hannah Oden. I'm a planning manager with PAG. So we'll go to Anona.
Hello, I'm the commuter programs coordinator here at the University of Arizona, and I do have to leave at 2, unfortunately, for a 30-minute meeting, but then we'll be back at 2:30.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Sonona. And then Ben Elias.
Hey, everybody. My name's Ben Elias. I'm a project manager with the City of Tucson in our Department of Transportation and Mobility.
Great, thanks for joining, Ben. Then Chris Joannes.
Good afternoon, Chris Joannes, Consultant Project Manager on the RATP with Kimley Horn.
Thanks, Chris. Dion Schwartz.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dion Schwartz. I am the traffic manager at the town of Marana.
Thanks, Dion. Jeanette.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Jeanette DeRoan, Transportation Planning Director here at PAG.
Thanks, Jeanette. Jennifer Hobart.
Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Hobart. I'm a Regional Transportation Planner with the ADOT Multimodal Planning Division.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Jonathan Crow.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Crow, Senior Planner with Pima County Department of Transportation.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Kristen Faltz.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Faltz with Kimley Horn.
Thanks, Kristen. And then we'll go to Lydia Barker.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lydia Barker with the City of Tucson Department of Transportation and Mobility.
Okay, thanks, Lydia. And then we'll go to Ryan Fagan.
This is as short as the heads.
Hi, I'm Ryan Fagan. I am a project manager and complete cities program coordinator with the City of Tucson Department of Transportation and Mobility.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. And then we'll go to Shamara Smith.
Hello, I'm Shamara Smith. I am the transit planner at Suntran.
Great, thanks, Shamara. And Stephen Dean.
Stephen Dean, Town of Marana Development Services Deputy Director.
Thanks, Stephen. And then I'll go over to my attendees list. So Alexandra Chavez.
Hi there. I'm Alex Chavez with the Town of Marana. I'm the project coordinator working with Dion here in Public Works.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. And we'll go to Carlos Suarez.
Hi, Carlos Suarez, Town of Cerritos, Construction and Development Manager.
Great. Thanks for joining, Carlos. And Jose Rodriguez.
Jose Rodriguez, Town of Oro Valley.
Awesome. Thanks, Jose. All right. And we also have our admin and IT team who are going to keep us going, make sure things are running smoothly. So thanks, Bree, Don, and Jesse for being the support for that. Was there anyone that I missed? Names are kind of jumping around. Yeah. All right. So if there's no one else, looks like I got everyone. And we'll move on to the second agenda item, which is our in-kind reporting. So let's go ahead and read this off the screen. So regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAC collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you are paid with federal dollars, please let us know now. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAC staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG, RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. All right, and with that, we'll move on to the next agenda item. planning process progress. So at this juncture, I'll turn it over to Chris with Kimberly Horn for their presentation.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. And thank you everyone for your time this afternoon. Definitely should not be a 2-hour meeting, maybe a 1-hour meeting. Really what we want to do is just set you up to begin your review of the projects we've come up with that go along with the preferred network for the regional active transportation improvements. And so I'll hop in here. Quick agenda. So we're going to look through our progress since our last meeting and where we are in the overall project scope and schedule. We'll touch on the preferred high priority network and where that ended up. We'll go through our methodology for developing the actual active transportation projects that go along with the high priority network. And then Kristen will take us through the draft project list and the web tool. You all have been working with this tool for several months now, reviewing the network scenarios, then the preferred network. And we've just updated that to begin the review of the actual project list. And then she'll also touch on public engagement round 2, which we're going to be launching here very shortly, and then next steps in the overall project. So looking here at our task list, we're wrapping up with the project development, really all 3 of these tasks, 3, 4, and 5. We're in the last stage of the regional corridor identification and evaluation, which again is actually developing the projects that go along with the high priority network. We are wrapping up the active transportation toolbox and addressing a few last minute comments on that, and also currently conducting the air quality benefits task. The last step here in the process is developing the actual RATP document. So that will be our last step here. That will come to the technical working group in draft form for you to be able to review and comment on it. In our schedule here, initially we were going to be wrapping this up in June. At this time now, we've extended that a bit to give more breathing room for us to develop the preferred network and the projects and meet with technical working group and other PAG committees a couple extra times. And so we're actually going to be extending through mid to late September, hoping to wrap up the corridor identification, evaluation, air quality benefits next month in July. We're also, as I mentioned, going to be doing some public and stakeholder engagement coming up. And finally, developing the PAG RATP document will begin in July, a draft in the early August timeframe. That's when we're anticipating to bring that back to you all as the technical working group to get your comments on that document. So moving to the high priority network package, big thank you to everybody who provided comments on this. We did develop a comment response form and everything, so you'll be able to see exactly how we addressed each of the comments you provided on that. I think we did end up with a good, robust network across the region, and so this is just a snapshot of how that ended up. Really very similar to what you saw in our last meeting, and then we've simply addressed the comments provided by you to finalize that. All right, so as I mentioned, the preferred network was our last step before we finally get to, oh, Ryan, I see you have your hand up, sorry.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, when will we be receiving the responses? Because or can you like summarize, I guess, because we had a lot of significant comments that I'm not sure were addressed.
Sure, Hannah, I don't know if after this meeting with the materials for this, would it be okay to release the comment response document we put together?
Yeah, you can send us the final version and we can work to distribute that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so you'll be getting that shortly, Ryan.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so yep, moving into our project development methodology here. So it was a multi-step process. And so I'll talk you through, we had several layers of review that we did in developing these projects. But long story short, at the end, we are really looking for your comments on these projects. You all live and work in these communities, and know the transportation system better than we ever will. And so we really value your input in putting together and refining the scopes of the projects that we have here. So our first step is we looked at each preferred network segment. So as a refresher, what we did was we broke up the transportation system across the entire region by arterials and split those wherever they hit another arterial. And that resulted in like 400 segments, Kristen can correct me if I'm wrong, of arterials across the region. About just under 200 of those wound up in our preferred network. And so we went segment by segment across the preferred network and looked at each of these steps listed below to identify projects. So the first step that we did was we did a review of any existing facilities on that arterial roadway or close to that arterial roadway to figure out if there's already a context appropriate facility that's serving that travel need. So if there's already a shared use path along an arterial, if there's already a path on a parallel corridor that's nearby, if there's already a bike boulevard parallel to a major arterial corridor. We found a lot of those in the city of Tucson. We did a quick review of those just to make sure they're context appropriate, but if everything looked good with that, there is a context appropriate project. We said, all right, this segment is already done, invested, and taken care of. If we determined that there isn't an existing facility, our next step was to look at any potential programmed projects. So we went through between CIPs, the PAG tip, ADOT's 5-year program, anything else we could find from you all as member agencies, and looked for projects that have construction funding associated with them already. And so that was the next step, was if there was a context appropriate facility that's already programmed by the jurisdiction, then we went ahead and dropped off that segment as well. So if there was no existing facility that was context appropriate, no identified programmed project that's context appropriate, then we took a look back at all of the previously recommended projects from our previous plans review. So we compiled a list of, oh boy, probably several hundred previously recommended projects. Some of them were context appropriate active transportation solutions, some of them were not, so we made a determination on that. So if there was a previously recommended project, we went ahead and drew that in as our RATP recommended project for that segment. So if there was no existing facility that already served the travel need, no programmed project that would, in a context appropriate way, serve the project need, and no previously recommended project that would serve that need, then we went ahead and developed our own new project based on that active transportation toolbox that a lot of you have reviewed and provided comments on. So we used that as kind of our guidepost for determining what context appropriate facilities are. It is a big mix of facility types. So, you know, a lot of these are shared use paths along arterials. In the urban core, it's leveraging a lot of bike boulevards on parallel routes, just because there's quite often more parallel routes available in the urban core where there's a more structured grid network. On-street bike facilities where appropriate, connections to parallel facilities. So along the loop, for example, what we did is, instead of adding a bunch of new facilities onto River Road, for example, we identified a bunch of connections to the loop from the River Road corridor, from activity centers to the loop, to encourage people to use the loop trail, as that's a safer facility than any on-street facility will ever be. And so there's a wide range of different treatments that we've applied. Any questions from the group on the process we went to identify the projects? Dion?
Yeah, I guess I'm a little bit surprised that there's so much judgment on behalf of Kimley Horn to kind of evaluate whether existing or planned facilities are going to fit the need of this particular project or this particular program. And I'm wondering how you approached that particular task, because it seems like maybe potentially a lot of potential projects may have fallen by the wayside because of this judgment, and a little bit concerned that that maybe opportunities to have enhanced facilities might be missed.
Sure. So a couple things on that. We used that active transportation toolbox that we put together with all of your help to help determine what context appropriate recommended facilities are. So if there's an existing 5-foot bike lane on an arterial, it may be better than nothing, but what we're really trying to do here is develop a robust regional network of active transportation facilities that follows that preferred network. And so, other roads, if all we can get is a bike lane, that's great. But what we're really trying to do with this preferred network is bring everything up to, honestly, a pretty high standard. What we want you to do as part of your review when looking at these projects is to let us know where we might have gone astray. And that's a perfectly valid suggestion to give us is, this thing may never happen, but we can do X, Y, and Z over here instead. And that's exactly the type of feedback that we're looking for from you. Does that answer your question? Anything else, other context I can provide?
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much.
Yep. Ben.
Hey, Chris, you'd mentioned that you looked at previously recommended projects when you're looking at your recommendations for these projects. Did you have a general timeline that you looked back to reference previously recommended projects? Can you give a little context around that process?
Yeah, we did a working paper, probably late last year, where we compiled all of the plans that may have active transportation recommendations from across the region. Crispin or Hannah, or Jeanette, feel free to butt in. I want to say we went back maybe like 10 years as the most. I would say the vast majority were from the last like 5 or 6 years. But I know, I want to say, for example, there was like a U of A ped bike plan that I want to say was like 2012 or something. So, we went back, reasonably far to try to get a comprehensive list of previously recommended projects. But there, if something's been superseded, like there were multiple versions of the RMAP project list as part of that. And so at one point we did go back and take out everything that was in the 2050 RMAP and replaced it with the 2055 RMAP project list. So we did try to, if there's anything where there, should have been a superseding plan, we did attempt to go back and replace those projects.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, great. I will move it forward and hand it over, I believe, to Kristen. And she's going to take us through the application to review the project list. Kristen, are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, I'm gonna send a request right now. Awesome. Okay, so it should come up in 1 second. Let's see. Okay, you guys should be able to see the web map. Let me know if that's correct.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, great. So it's just the same application as what we've been using in previous iterations of comments. But just a quick review, there are a few more layers here. And then just a reminder that there's the attribute table down here that you can use to zoom to certain features and things like that. But just to give a quick introduction on the web map and how it's set up this time before you go in and start your review. So for each geographic area, we have our projects. Behind our projects, we have our preferred high priority network package that you can reference. So for example, you can see here like we have the high priority network along river, but you can see that there's actually not a project facility on there, but it's leveraging like the loop here to the south. So within our projects, we have two layers, and let me go ahead and flip over to the legend really quick. So we have two layers for our preferred network packages, our new upgraded facilities, and then our existing facilities. So like Chris had mentioned when he was going through the project overview, like of the development process, we wanted to try to make sure that we not only just put recommendations on the arterial network, but we also were able to move facilities to a parallel corridor that may have more comfort for active transportation users. And so there were some instances where a project may be completed directly on the preferred network segment with newer upgraded facilities. There are, and so that's shown in solid. There are also segments that are shown in solid that are new upgraded facilities on a more local or collector road, like you can see here. And then there are also instances where we get into the dashed lines, which are where we're leveraging existing facilities that aren't necessarily being upgraded. So a good example of this is also up at the loop. So we're in this project, for example, we're not actually recommending changes to the loop, but we're recommending changes to its connection to River Road. And so, sorry, one second, it's selecting the wrong thing. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off geographic areas real quick. And so you can see here when you're doing your review, because they're symbolized differently, they're technically separate features in the attribute table, but they have the same segment ID. So for example, here we have segment ID 353, which the segment ID references what we had in the preferred network segment ID. So that's a link between those two data sets. And then you can see here that this also has the segment ID of 353. So that kind of dictates that it's from the same project. And then all of the information that you have in the attribute table is the same between the two line types. So if you want to know about this project in particular, you can select either one of those and the information will come up with the segment ID for the preferred network, the name, the road, its bounds, and then a description. And that will include a description for the existing facilities that are being used as well as facilities that are recommended for upgrades. And then another example I want to highlight really quick is, I believe this one. Yeah, so looking at Grant Road, we have this project 277 that's recommending improvements not only on the Grant Road corridor, but also on two bicycle boulevards, one to the north and one to the south. So that's all part of one project. So just wanted to orient you guys with that. In terms of what else we have in the, oh, yes, Ryan?
Sorry, I'm just trying to understand what I'm looking at here. So
yeah,
you're showing Grant from Country Club East as a new upgraded facility. Was there consideration of the fact that that's an RTA project that's under construction right now?
So we do have programmed projects, like Chris said, that we looked at. So that should have been in our list and we did take a look at that. But similarly, if the active transportation toolbox doesn't find that facility to be like appropriate, we did recommend additional improvements, but that's definitely something we'll want you to call out locations like that in your review. If you don't think it's needed, if you think that that already programmed in like project that's actively being constructed fills that need, then we can remove that if it's stated in your comments.
Okay, and then another question, the existing facilities. So I took a brief look at this map earlier because I was trying to refer to what was previously on it and I saw that it had been changed. And I'm seeing, like, for example, it's showing like all these existing bicycle boulevards. Is the assumption that those are completed? Because most of them are not and some of them aren't funded, including some where you're showing like existing facilities.
Okay, yeah. So in terms of the bicycle boulevards, we did have like a bicycle boulevard like shapefile that we were referencing, and we did confirm like via bike route signs and if they had sharrows to just double check that in Google Maps, it made sense. If we did get any of that wrong, and something's not a bicycle boulevard showing with this existing facilities dashed line, please let us know that too. And that's something that we can switch. If you think it's appropriate to have a bicycle boulevard on that roadway, we can change that into that newer upgraded facilities layer to show that it's not existing, and get that updated in the description as well.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I guess I'm just saying, like, I'm a little concerned that there's a lot of errors with like the inputs on here, and given that the concerns that we expressed and with the network package and other things not appearing to be addressed, I guess I'm wondering, are we going to be told, well, it's too late, we're already moving? Like, how is this going to work if there are actually like significant issues with the inputs on this? I mean, because what I don't want us to be doing is just having to throw out this whole thing and just make up a whole bunch of new projects because the assumptions that went into it were significantly in error in some areas.
So again, if there's a bike boulevard facility on here that needs further improvement and we're showing it reflected as using an existing facility, please call that out to us. I think we got that layer from the city, and we could have missed like an attribute or something for if it's
right. No, I think
not,
maybe I'm not being clear. What I'm saying is that you're showing existing bicycle boulevards where there is nothing and where we don't have funded projects.
Right. And so if we put that in our preferred network as a dashed line, as in leveraging an existing facility, we want you to call that out to us so we can add it to the list of projects that need like actual bike boulevard treatments applied to them.
Okay. Thanks.
But the preferred network itself, as in the roads that we're trying to accommodate the travel for, that's pretty well set at this point.
And then Dion, it looks like you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. I understood you to say that judgment that I had the previous question about was largely informed by the toolbox, which was a deliverable, or which was something we reviewed very early. And I remember having a lot of concerns and a lot of comments on that particular document, and we never saw a subsequent submittal. So I guess I'm a little bit concerned that this particular document, which in many ways I found to be very flawed, is what was being used to help assess whether a particular facility would be appropriate for a particular road.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Dion's comment as well.
So we did go through and address all of the comments we received. We'll check with Hannah to see what's the latest that's been sent out to you, but we do have an updated version and a comment response on that as well, right, Kristen, for all of the comments we received. So that, again, we can send out a new version with the latest we have. We did make some changes based on your comments, so hopefully it's at the point where you're comfortable. But again, I want to stress, we used that as a guidebook for context appropriate facilities. If you think that what we've recommended here in the actual projects is not feasible or isn't context appropriate, or you have alternative ideas, for how we accommodate the travel on a certain road. That's exactly the type of comment we're trying to get from you at this point to refine the project list.
Okay, thank you.
As long as we're on the topic of the toolbox, are we going to get a chance to review it again before it's finalized?
Yeah, we'll send out an updated version.
Thank you.
Great. And so one more thing as we're looking at the web map. We have 2 additional reference layers that can be used just as you're doing your review to show overall connectivity. So you can see here, we have a bicycle boulevard layer just to see how it's connecting in with our network. So you can see here, where if we didn't have this layer, it would maybe look like a project just dropped off, but wanted to give that context of how it connects with the overall like active transportation network, specifically as we're talking about shared use paths and bicycle boulevards. So just wanted to mention that that's why those are there. But I think if there's no additional comments on how to use the web map, we can switch back to the PowerPoint and we can talk through kind of what we're looking for more as you review. Yes, Ryan?
So as I mentioned, the existing bicycle boulevard map here has a lot of, excuse me, it has a lot of errors. Is this something that we can work with you to get corrected on here for, during the review process?
Yeah, if you have a
sorry.
more updated layer, we're happy to include that in an updated version of the web map before we send it out to you all to review. We definitely can do that.
Okay, yeah, I don't know what layer we're working with, but we have a version that has like the status. So we have ones that are planned that were in our master plan. We have ones that are funded. We have ones that are that are completed. So I think that's an important attribute to take into account. Yeah, if you want to, it might be worth looking at what you've got to see if the data that you have incorporates that, and if not, then we can get you the correct data.
Okay. Jonathan?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, this might be a question for Chris too. So I think having the shared use paths layer and the existing bicycle boulevard layer as just references is good. Something that I've kind of always wanted and maybe was expecting with the analysis, and it doesn't appear to be in the analysis, is just simply whether or not there are paved shoulders or bike lanes along the arterial and collector street system. And I guess I just want to confirm that that data is not reflected in this map at all.
Yeah, so it's not reflected in this map, but that was considered during our project development process. So for example, if we were going to do like this section of grant here that was on our preferred network package, our first step once we got to that segment was looking at the current facilities. We logged the current facility, so if there was sidewalk or bike lane or whatever happened to be on that segment of road, and then if those were determined applicable from the toolbox. So looking at the speed, the volume, things like that. And then if they weren't, that's when we moved on to actually looking at programmed and planned projects, and then ultimately developing our project description. So it definitely was considered, and it was kind of that first step of the project development process.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, I just have, sorry about that. I just have one more, sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. I have just one more quick question. I don't see any collectors on here, and I know that's something that I and other people brought up as some concerns with the initial analysis, and I'm just, if you can speak to sort of whether collector streets were considered for any projects, and if not, why not?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So although the preferred network was what we were basing the package off of, as we were looking at every individual segment, we were looking for those parallel routes. So we definitely were considering collectors if there was, if it seemed appropriate, if there was enough right of way that it was a more comfortable situation for a facility, and if it was close enough to the actual like segment where the demand was shown. So anything within half a mile was considered like a parallel roadway that we could potentially leverage. And so as you're reviewing, if you think for any of these projects that maybe there is a collector that we may have missed that would be better than an arterial that we have shown here, please feel free to, comment that and we can get that incorporated.
All right, thank you.
Great. Well, I will stop sharing my screen and we can go through the comment process more. Oh, Dion, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was kind of just reflecting on the toolbox that we reviewed a while back, and I remember there was a lot of discussion regarding crossings, and I'm wondering how that was incorporated in your analysis for projects.
Yeah, there are projects that have crossings within their description. And so we did try to like align the crossing that's most appropriate with that roadway type based on the speed that was identified in the toolbox. But that will be found in the description. We don't necessarily have like a point file in the web map.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so going into comments, we can go to the next slide. Oh, I see. Sorry, I didn't know I could move it. There we go. Okay. So if you could send any comments that you have over to PAG, we just kind of wanted to talk through what we're looking for exactly. So now that you've seen the web map, I know we talked a bit about it when I was sharing the actual website, but please go through them and identify if there's anything regarding the location of the project that you think needs to change. So that could be, leveraging a collector that maybe we put on the arterial, or maybe a bicycle boulevard that isn't actually implemented yet. We have shown we can make that change. And then are there any project scope elements that you'd like to change? Is there a different like facility type or improvement type that you would like to leverage instead of what we have recommended? Like Chris said, you guys are boots on the ground there, so we want to make sure that you agree with what kind of we have developed in the projects and you kind of gear where they go to in this final stage, since these are just draft for you to kind of mull over and think through a little bit more. Another thing that we want to think through is there any projects that we can combine? Are there two projects that might be serving the same general area? So if you have any recommendations or comments for that. And then a lot of our projects are pretty long segments. And so please comment on if you have any ideas on how to break projects apart into phasing to help make the plan more implementable for your jurisdictions. Ryan?
Hi, yeah. So if we, I guess, a concern that we have here at the city is that the analysis leading to the network packages, leading to the recommended projects, that there was sort of a breakdown in the actual need versus what we got. And so like I'm, looking at this map, if I guess, are we sort of limited to projects that are within, a half mile of the prefer, the high priority network package, or can we say there should be a project here 2 miles away from any lines that you're showing on the map?
Chris, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I would like to keep it to projects that serve the same need as the priority network that we've developed.
Okay, so this is really frustrating because we have consistently tried to provide constructive feedback on this whole process, and have essentially been ignored a lot of the time. And so now we're at this point where there's very little that can change, honestly. Where we're seeing where there's need, where the top 100 segments we're showing that there's need. And now we're not seeing projects there. And I could get into the density of projects where there are the most people, the most safety issues that need addressing, the most demonstrable need. And there's just not the coverage there. And so, I mean, do you get where I'm coming from? This has been an ongoing, issue that we've been trying to sort of constructively deal with, but we're always past the point where we can actually, actually affect change and actually get to something that is actually representative of the need within the city and was, specifically within the urban core.
So I know you've brought that up, and we definitely have talked with PAG multiple times about the methodology we're using. We did give multiple opportunities to comment on both the network scenarios and the preferred network, and anything that representatives from the group suggested as specific roadways to incorporate in the final network, we went ahead and did that. Yeah, we can't keep going back and
but you've never gone back
those again.
But you haven't, I mean, so maybe our problem was actually trying to work with you and actually try to, suggest a change in the way that the, of the methodology, as opposed to micromanaging all the individual project segments. Because yeah, we didn't provide, there should be a project here and not here. We said, let's take a step back while we're at the stage where we can do that and actually try to, instead of starting with an analysis that the end product bears absolutely no resemblance to, to actually try to have something that's at least a little bit data driven in the end. We either got responses weeks later or not at all to the emails that we sent. So it really feels like there was no attempt to try to work with us or try to address, our concerns or try to tell us, hey, this is not the kind of input we're looking for. This is what we're willing to accept. And there was a lack of communication and a lack of willing to work with us that has really led us to this point where this is not a plan that looks like it's going to work for the city.
We'll go back and talk with PAG staff and see what we can do. But again, we're trying to keep to a schedule. And it would be, a lot of rework to go back to revisiting the methodology again. And we can't go all the way back there at this point. Kimley Horn will talk with PAG staff about accommodations we can make for specific recommendations, but I just don't think we can go all the way back and revisit the methodology again at this point.
You say again. Sorry, I apologize for expressing my frustration here the way that I am, but I hope you understand where we're coming from here, and where I'm coming from is we've provided input that has not been incorporated, and so you say we can't go back, but you didn't work with us back when the opportunity was there to incorporate our comments. I mean, I see hardly anything on in the outputs that we've got here that resembles what we were asking for. I mean, that's so, I guess I don't know why we would be providing input going forward, because it's likely to be ignored as well.
We are openly asking for your project suggestions right now and want to refine that list so it's useful for the city as well as all the other member agencies. Like I said, we'll go back and talk to PAG staff and come up with a response to your concerns here. But yeah, we're not going back all the way to revisiting the initial methodology that drove the scenarios on the preferred network. So be on the lookout. We'll reach out, Ryan, and
I appreciate that.
Have a discussion. Yep.
Okay. And then one more note on providing feedback. We actually have an additional survey. So once you've reviewed the projects and given your comments, we ask that you take this additional survey that's here at this link. We're asking for you to identify your top 10 transformational projects. So what projects do you think are going to be most impactful for the region? Just because we know there are a lot of projects that were recommended. So definitely want to get input on what the highest priority is for Pima County. Any questions on providing feedback before we move on?
Kristen, this is Jonathan. On this survey, are you providing any kind of a list or are you keeping it wide open for us?
Yeah, Christiana.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. So the survey, and you'll see it when we send out an updated presentation. Kristen's already drafted email language that'll go out to you here shortly. When you go in the survey, you'll see just one question, and it has 10 spots to fill in. What we're asking for is the project ID from the web map that you're seeing. Enter your top 10 transformational or most impactful. We're still figuring out how we want to ultimately phrase this, but really the top 10 projects that you believe will move the needle for the region, and this mimics what we're asking for from the public, where their version of a web map will actually have a thumbs up, thumbs down piece to it, and they can also give comments, but we really want to hear from the technical working group as well, kind of, what are the big ones that you see as critical to moving active transportation forward for the region?
Thanks. That helped. I guess my comment on that approach is that, I may have personal opinions or, very subjective ideas about what I think might be appropriate within my jurisdiction, let alone others. But I kind of was counting on this study to provide a quantitative analysis that would make that decision much more science and data-based so that it wasn't just purely subjective on my part. And while I think there's always a place for subjectivity, especially when it comes to public involvement from the stakeholders and the technical folks here on this committee, we really kind of rely on the analysis to tell us what actually is a high priority project versus something that we may think is a priority. So hearing about how you're approaching the survey, I guess I'm inclined to say let's not put too much weight on that survey because it's just going to be very very subjective and not really based on anything other than whatever the individuals who are recommending are basing it on.
So it's definitely a small piece to the overall puzzle. And again, it's going to be paired with public engagement. And you're right to the point that subjectivity, but also political will to moving these projects forward is really the key. And so we want to hear from the public and we want to hear from staff on, kind of their more subjective thoughts on it. But really the definition of the preferred network and how we went about developing the projects that go along with it is really the data-driven piece. The preferred network ended up a little bigger than we originally intended. We were trying to have like 100 segments in the end and wound up with almost 200. And so our comment from PAG when they did their initial review was, well, I think we're at 140 projects right now. And so they wanted to have an indicator maybe on, what are the public favorites and the staff favorites among those. But again, the idea of the network is to really work on bringing that entire network up to a higher standard to facilitate active transportation use across the region. So don't feel like exactly what we take from you, Jonathan, is going to wind up as a, higher priority project necessarily than the other ones.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Dion?
Yeah, regarding the top 10 high impact projects or transformational projects, I'm wondering whether I should be wearing my jurisdictional hat when I make that evaluation or whether I need to be looking region-wide about that. So that's the first part of my question. And the second part is, does identifying a project as one of the top 10 give it a boost in terms of being implemented in the future? Like suppose, the public and the working group all find a project that seems to have a lot of impact and is transformational. How is PAG going to handle that information? Does that somehow give it more likelihood of being funded? Is my question. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll answer the first part. I think I would like you to give your put your regional hat on and not your agency hat when answering that, and telling us what you believe are the most impactful projects for the region. That's a really good question. We didn't make that differentiation. And then Hannah or Jeanette, I'll let you answer the funding priority question, for lack of a better term.
Sure, yeah. So, kick us off with that. So, yeah, I mean, if there's a lot of comments and support for a particular project that might be transformational in the region, that's a good guide for jurisdictions for submitting the project for implementation, whether that's including it in the RMAP or other plans. It's really to help guide the prioritization that way. I know Jeanette, if there's anything that you wanted to add there, or if that answers the question.
Yeah, that pretty much answers the question. Funding prioritization is going to be based on the requirements of the funding source. So, it's not gonna, like, if we pick 10 projects, that's not gonna say that, these are the first 10 we should fund out of the gate, or these are the only 10 that are going to receive funding. It's nothing like that. It's just to see, which projects really are standouts and we believe as professionals would make a big difference. So that's really all we're looking for. But yeah, as Chris said, put your regional hat on and think about it at that level versus just your Marana hat.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Thanks, Dion.
Great. Well, I think we'll move into public engagement next. So jumping into round 2. So I know we've touched on it a little bit today, but the goal is to take the RATP project list to the public and overlay that with the preferred network package to give them some context. And like Chris had mentioned, they will get a version of the web map that's pretty similar to what you guys have been using throughout the project process, except each project will have like an upvote, downvote, and then comment button. So really that's what we'll be getting from them. What do they dislike? What do they like? And what are their comments for each project? So yeah, and then we'll get that information from them. So it'll be mostly virtual, and then we'll be doing a variety of pop-up events throughout the region to get the word out and provide materials that will kind of direct them to the online mapping tool. So there's a variety of potential opportunities that we're looking at currently, such as the Star Spangled Spectacular and 4th of July in Marana, and then some various pop-ups throughout the region, such as like Clements and then popping up on the loop. And so different events like that. I know that we are working to still finalize those in the next few days. So if anyone has any ideas of events coming up in your jurisdiction that you think would be great to target, we are looking to run this from launching here pretty soon, hopefully in the next few days, and then running that through mid-July. So please let us know if you have any additional ideas for in-person pop-up events. Ben?
Yeah, can I just, if you have any clarity on, the loop is a very large facility, where along the loop you might be trying to pop up and engage folks that would be utilizing the loop. That would be one question of mine. The second one is really more of a comment, and again, trying to think regionally here. I think it's a little bit distressing to have a list of in-person pop-up events that leaves out some of our more rural partners in the region. I think particularly out near Ajo, that there wouldn't be any planned engagements for anybody in your far west region. I think one suggestion that I might throw out there is trying to work with the District 3 supervisor, Jen Allen's office, as their staff regularly heads out to Ajo and tries to really thoughtfully engage their constituents out in that neck of the woods.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for that recommendation. I appreciate it. And then regarding your first question on where we're going to have a pop-up event on the loop, we are still working on determining potential locations, but I know that we did talk about popping up at St. Philip's Plaza because we know that that location in particular, with the farmers market and all the businesses, especially on the weekends, generates a lot of bicyclist and pedestrian activity. So I know we had that on the list and looking to identify potential alternatives as well. Great. So I'll move on. Oops, sorry. Any other questions on public engagement before we move on to next steps? Well, I will pass it off to Chris then.
Thanks, Kristen. So, and I want to start with a question more than anything. The list is relatively long, as Kristen mentioned. We're hoping to get that out to you earlier, but we're making edits to the projects up until late last night. So we originally had a deadline for the 27th, which is the end of next week. I think we would be willing to extend that out to the 4th, or hopefully you're not working on the 4th and maybe the day before the 3rd. Do you feel like the 27th is enough time as a group, or do you feel like you want that extra week to provide comments on the project list? Because I know it's a pretty hefty list to go through.
It's Jonathan. I'd advocate pushing it out if possible, just due to my own personal schedule this summer, and it's going to be difficult for me to be able to spend the time I need to go through this thing as closely as I'd like to before the 27th, let alone the 4th.
Okay. Ryan, I see you have your hand up.
I agree with Jonathan. I think the 4th or later would be preferable.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's a tough time of year. A lot of time off in there. We'll preliminarily say the 4th, or honestly like the Monday after. We'll talk with PAG and see if we can do more time than that, but then we are starting to impact our schedule again. But we'll discuss and get back to you the final due date. We'll go ahead and send everything out as soon as we can so you can get started. But yeah, I thought that less than 2 weeks now might be kind of tough. So we'll go ahead and push that out a little bit. Later in June, we'll be launching our engagement, as Kristen mentioned, which will run through July, simultaneously be doing our air quality benefits analysis. And then starting in July and coming through early August, we'll be developing the draft final plan, bring that back to the technical working group in August, with the intention of the plan going to Transportation Planning Committee and ultimately Regional Council in September. All right, that's all we had. We'll be sending out that information here very shortly to you to begin your review. And just thank you all in advance for all the comments you're going to provide. As I said, we're really open to making updates to the projects at this time. You know, our team did our best to develop those, and PAG staff has done an initial review, but you all are closest to the conditions on the ground, and so we really want to get your input on modifying those projects and updating the scopes. So just really appreciate anything you can provide. Thank you, and I'll pass back to Hannah to close it out.
All right, thanks so much. Thanks, Kristen, and thank you everyone for the good discussion and valuable feedback. Really appreciate it. So is there anything else? Any last thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, I just want to say, I appreciate the work that folks have put into this. But I just do want to go on the record as saying that, you know, the city has been, you know, kind of obstructed or ignored kind of at every step. And we've gotten to a point where, you know, there is, you know, this draft plan that doesn't really resemble, you know, what your own analysis showed. It doesn't resemble sort of what we've asked for. And, you know, we're just the city, but we do represent, you know, more than half the population, and, you know, the areas with the greatest need in terms of where, you know, traffic fatalities are happening, you know, active transportation, you know, vulnerable user traffic fatalities, where there is, you know, more potential and more need for active transportation improvements. And our concerns and our requests have been ignored. And now we're at this point where, you know, sort of the scope of what can change is very narrow. And so we're based on what we've been told in this meeting today, we are not going to get a finished product that is going to work for the city of Tucson. So I just want to go on the record as saying that, and I would really appreciate it if, you know, we could be given an opportunity to actually be heard and have our comments be listened to, because so far that has not happened.
Sure. No, thanks for the comment, Ryan. And yeah, we've gone through everything that you provided, and, you know, done our best to incorporate it, but we'll follow up absolutely with you. So yeah, thanks for your comment. All right. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to item 9, which is adjournment. So thank you everyone again for attending, for the feedback. I have a list of follow-up items, so just be on the lookout for some additional information. Jeanette, I see you're unmuted. Did you have any last thoughts?
No, not right now, Hannah. Thanks.
Okay, sure. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, again, appreciate everyone's time. I will follow up with additional information, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
You too.
Thanks, everyone.